We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday, and welcome to it. Live streaming 10:30 on the Eastern Seaboard, coming to you on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Make sure you smash the thumbs up if you haven't already, and follow the channel. Guys, we're getting to that 4,000 level here. We're really excited to keep expanding it. If you listen to the audio format on iTunes and Spotify, iHeart, any of those platforms, make sure you subscribe so you get the show updates on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Time. Today, we're going to be talking about turning the page. It's a brand new year. We spent our first episode of January 2025 talking about the New Orleans attack. I want to get to more standard fare today. We're turning the page, have an incoming new presidential administration, and then some certain mentalities and focuses that are in all the wrong spots. Things like DEI and continuing to send just more billions of dollars to Ukraine, lying about coronavirus, and then also some personal accountability, some responsibility. We have work to do in that regard because people don't want to put in the hours to drop the LBs, even in January when everyone has their New Year's resolutions in effect, at least for one more week. When we get to next Friday, that is, of course, Quitter's Day, when most people drop off. And that's when the traffic at my gym goes down and I'm back to normal. Back to normal, though, on a Saturday, which means that we've got Garrett here with me at GOB Actual, ready to react to everything I'm going to throw at him. I'm going to hit him cold because I like to get those cold reactions. Looking a little warmer than you were on the Thursday show, but maybe you just, I don't know, put a little bit more degrees in and just sprung for an extra hit on the electrical bill.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it, Steve, because it's still cold here. It's actually colder here today than it was on Thursday, but I had to wrap my Fight with Cash hoodie today, so I'll bear a few colder degrees, some more winter-like temps to represent for the Cash Foundation and Fight with Cash.
Well, you're probably through with your black coffee. So I'm not going to hit you with a black pill off the bat when we want to talk about some of these DEI rules. We're turning the page on it. We've talked about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. They're going to include new accessibility, make it DEIA, or switch it around and make it IDEA. That's my prediction in 2025. You'll probably see that getting put forward. But a good news in turning the page on it is actually coming from the court systems, which we still have some judges here that have a certain semblance of common sense. And this relates to publicly traded companies on the NASDAQ trades, which are typically they're tech companies, right? You have the S&P 500 and on all these other different ones. But let's go to this one. This comes from the AP. They're talking about an appeals court that rejects diversity rules for company boards. This is a crazy rule, and that they came out with it, and actually under the Biden's Securities and Exchange Commission was approved. But according to AP, an appeals court in Louisiana ruled that the NASDAQ cannot require diversity on the board of directors for companies that are listed on its exchange. The proposed policy, which was the first of its kind, wow, we're just breaking all precedents here, would have required most of the nearly 3,000 companies listed on NASDAQ to have at least one woman on their board of directors, along with one person from a racial minority who identifies as LGBTQIA rainbow kamikaze. It also would have required companies to publicly disclose those statistics, as well as their own demographics, like what color are the people who work for our company, waste time and focus on that. And last thing here, the court said in its ruling that the Securities and Exchange Commission should never have approved NASDAQ's proposed diversity policy. So that's a good decision. I mean, it's a decision for common sense.
Yeah.
And it's actually going to save money for those companies, which is good for their shareholders. I mean, DEI is the death of everything important. Anytime that you're prioritizing something other than merit and putting out a good quality, by definition, your product and your quality will suffer. And I think I'm encouraged by that decision.
For sure. I find myself wondering how we even got to that point where is maybe the page really is turning, and the government and companies are starting to realize how crazy all of this has always been. On Thursday when we covered the New Orleans attack, somebody in the chat, or maybe it was on X, I don't know, one other or the other. I saw this comment where IED is DEI backwards, and I thought, oh, that is pretty fitting because DEI is essentially an IED to society and how humans have functioned essentially forever. And in the alleged land of the free, it's pretty insane that we're at a point where, think of getting to the Security and Exchange Commission when you're getting a rule or proposed rule or a rule overturned that's you're at that level. Houston, we have a problem, which should have never gotten there. These companies, NASDAQ, they should have decided long ago that this is not a good idea. You see companies today more and more turning their own page. Nobody's making them do it. They're turning their own page and repealing some of their DEI agendas and quota standards because they don't work. They make the company worse. Like you said, the shareholders suffer, the product suffers, the people suffer because the people who are meritorious, they're putting in the effort, they're putting in good work. They don't care by and large about people's race or their hair color or their what they have dangling or not dangling between their legs. That doesn't matter. What matters is who's doing the work and who's doing the best work to make the company better, to make the team better, and to all excel in a direction towards whatever the company or team's mission is. But no, DEI, and maybe because it's still fresh, or maybe it's because I'm bitter and have a black pill for a heart. But I can't stop thinking about the DEI we saw on display from the FBI, and we see it all the time. We've called it out before. People like Jennifer Moore, now retired luxuriously with a retirement gig, but you got nose ring agent Alethea Duncan calling a terrorist attack not a terrorist event, even though there's IEDs there. To the point where they got to fly in. What they fly in, Steve? Who they fly in? They flew in a white guy from headquarters. They had to fly in to try to, I don't know, fix the problem. I don't think he did much of a good job either. But DEI is the death of a society.
Yeah, they love to bring in that guy, and I guess they put it on pause. The DEI as being one of their core values, when really their prime directive is don't embarrass us, and they're like, all right, move along, toots. We have to bring
Uh-huh.
in the guy who really doesn't do very well. He just talks authoritatively there,
Right, right.
and this at large, I mean, it's a debate. You could have a libertarian debate about the merits because the Nasdaq is private companies. It's an exchange. It's a private exchange. It's not government. But this is the hack that communists have found. It's very much like the ESG, the environmental and social governance that's gone on, where they bring about Marxism via the private sector. Because
Yeah.
by co opting all of these companies and making that a cause for them, you're going to push forward a the the priority is going to be not on performing well. And then, like, the downstream consequences of that are, if you eliminate people from the boards that are good in merit, then your companies are going to suffer, and that's going to cause all the shareholders to suffer. And really goes back to also the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is an arm of the government. And they said, well, this rule is fine. They were actually put for a decision on this, and they said it was acceptable to them. And you also alluded to how there's been sort of this natural ebb and flow. We seem to be ebbing backwards away from the craziness here. You have guys like Robbie Starbuck that have gotten all these big
Mhm.
giant companies to pull back on the DEI. I am remain cynical and skeptical. I think that they're just going to whack-a-mole it and bring something out new because there's just too much of the infiltration from the communists at this point. And then there's also other companies out there that are just flat out saying, well, yeah, well, we're just going to do it anyway. So the connecting story that I had to that was, while the tech companies on the NASDAQ are saying things like, all right, I guess we're not going to do that. I mean, by court order at this point. You have Costco, which says, no, we're going to do the Target thing and we're just going to lean harder into it. So this comes from Forbes. Costco doubles down on DEI as a
Thanks,
as a
Costco.
business case. They are telling their shareholders that we don't care, right? That's basically what it boils down to. But there was a shareholder meeting, and again, the terminology means something. And I'll even take this back to the ESG reference that I made before. One of the big terms in ESG is a shift from shareholder to stakeholder, and they sound very similar. It's like equity and equality, right?
Mm.
And unless you know, you don't know. A shareholder is someone like Garrett who buys a share of stock in Costco. And if Costco does really well and the share price goes up, if Garrett goes to sell his share, he gets a profit from it, but he gets a voting share in the company. He is interested, he has a stake in the company. What is a stakeholder? According to ESG, a stakeholder is not Garrett, somebody who's actually put skin in the game. A stakeholder is people who work for us, our customers, the environment, because if we pollute the environment, then all of the people. So basically, we're going to give it to everyone. Everyone's a stakeholder, and we should be accountable to everyone, not the people who have skin in the game, but to everyone. And now the executives who run those companies that buy into this, they don't get fired for cause. They can't be fired for cause when they run their company to the ground because they say, I don't owe the shareholders a duty to do the best thing for the company to make them money. My duty is to the stakeholders. So I'm going to push forward DEI. So back to this report from Forbes. During their latest shareholder meeting, the Garretts out there who own stock, Costco board of directors was asked to vote on the shareholder proposal. The shareholders were like,
Ah,
"We're going to make you vote for this."
yes,
Okay,
good,
they
good.
want to address the risks of DEI. It so this here's some of the quotes. So it's
This
clear that this is from the shareholders.
is gonna be good. I already know it.
It's clear that DEI holds litigation, reputational, and financial risks to the company, and
Yes.
therefore financial risks. And yet, Costco still has such a program, still employs a chief diversity officer, and still contributes shareholder money, our money,
Yep.
to organizations that advance discriminatory agendas of
Yeah.
DEI.
There we go.
So, with 310,000 employees, Costco likely has at least 200,000 employees who are potentially victims of illegal discrimination
Uh-oh.
because they are white, Asian, male, or straight. Even if only a fraction of those employees were to file a lawsuit and only some of those prove successful, the cost to Costco would be tens of billions of dollars.
Yes. If you're listening to this and you work at Costco, file a lawsuit.
File a lawsuit. What was the response, though, from the board of directors from Costco
We're
when
doing
these
it anyways.
concerns being raised by the shareholders? Let me read it to you verbatim, Garrett. Ready?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Quote,
My laughter will turn to anger. I have a feeling.
our board has considered this proposal and believes that our commitment to an enterprise rooted in respect and
Oh,
inclusion
shut the
is
F
appropriate and necessary. The report requested by this proposal, all they're asking for is a report about
Yeah.
their exposure. Okay. The report requested by this proposal would not provide meaningful additional information because they're going to get sued to our shareholders. And the board has thus unanimously recommends a vote against this proposal. The proposal is issue us report. Are we at risk of being sued by your employees
We
because
don't
you're
wanna give you the
discriminating?
report. We can't. I'm on the board. I can't give you the report. This is great. Okay, so where does this lead? I think in a society that is trending in the right direction, they've realized, okay, we've gotten way too culty over here. We don't want to actually be the LGBTQ DEIA plus death cult. So let's turn the page. Maybe in a way, turn the page back and say, okay, we got to get rid of this crap. And now unanimously the board says, we actually don't even want to give you the report about what this could mean because we've drank all the Kool-Aid and we want the purple-haired lesbian who didn't really work hard to get here and doesn't really know what she's doing, can't run a team. Her inferiors give her a bad report every year, but hey, she keeps getting promoted because DEIA plus. And yeah, I have a feeling, Steve, that the board will win this. They're going to win out in the long run because That's how this works. That's what money does. If you are a actual shareholder, which when you go back to the language piece of shareholder and stakeholder, when you are a shareholder, you are the stakeholder. The environment is not. You are. You're the one with the actual stake in the matter because you put your money where your mouth was and said, I want to own a piece of this company. I have a feeling that hopefully by 2026, the board of directors is going to be entirely replaced. Maybe I'm feeling a little too optimistic today.
Well, that board of directors does not want to go back to owing a duty to shareholders versus stakeholders
Yep.
for ideological purposes. I'm sure there's lots of communists on that board of directors,
Oh, for sure.
but secondly, it's back to the Ghostbusters. Like you can't go to the private sector; they expect results.
Yeah.
So if they have to answer to shareholders who expect them to have a
Oh,
profitable
yes.
company versus, well, look at all the good we're doing for the environment. Who
Mhm.
cares the fact that we've turned in loss after loss, quarter after quarter? We're achieving the mission for the stakeholders. So there's some personal enrichment factors there as well.
Our hot dogs are still cheap and good, so doesn't matter.
I don't go to
I
Costco.
don't either. I just heard about the hot dogs.
I go to BJ's across the road from me. Sam's Club is good too. All right. Let's pivot off of the DEI and go to it always goes back to it. The
Always COVID. Oh,
coronavirus.
I knew it. I knew it. Folks, he didn't tell me.
Coronavirus
I knew it though.
and turning the page on the intelligence community writ large, right?
Mm,
With Chuck Schumer, they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting you.
yep.
The you I don't think it's a failure. I mean, it was purposely done. And it's now come out in the Wall Street Journal of how bad it really was. So this is reporting
Uh-oh.
from Wall Street Journal, and it is about the fact that the IC kept the lab leak theory from Joe Biden during briefings with him on purpose. I
IC
mean,
is intelligence community for those of you at home taking notes.
so the lab leak theory, there was the natural origin theory where a bat flew 600 miles from where it nested and I don't know, gnawed at a pangolin, which vomited into a stew, which humans ate, and then we got coronavirus.
Sure.
Or it was
That
the
sounds
bioweapons lab that was in that town,
uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
So interestingly, our ex-girlfriend, the FBI, was the only intelligence agency that was moderately confident in the lab leak theory. But the agency was not invited to a key August 2021 briefing with President Biden, in which other
Well,
intelligence officials shared their consensus view that the virus was more likely had jumped from animal to human.
their consensus view, you don't say, huh?
And the FBI argued that the coronavirus cases would be seen in a larger swath of China if the natural origin theory were
China.
true. Like if it had jumped from beast to man, we probably would have seen more of it throughout the entire country.
Massive,
Seeing as how those
massive
bats
breakout.
flew 600 freaking miles,
Yeah.
but we didn't see that. 3 scientists working from the Pentagon from their National Center for Medical Intelligence found that coronavirus was the product of risky research work, contradicting the position of the Defense Intelligence Agency. But their findings did not make it into Biden's report that he received. And again, this is August of 2021. So if you remember, that's when the Afghanistan withdrawal was, the
Mm-hmm.
disastrous. That's when there was actually quite a bit of unanimity. Joe Biden said he wanted unity. There was unity in being just disgusted by the way that the country left Afghanistan, and we allowed 13 service members to be killed at Abbey Gate, and we had people hanging off of the landing gear. But it was definitely not like the last helicopter out of Hanoi, right?
Right.
And that's when the Biden administration flipped. They said, we got to get out of the X here. The narrative has to go to something else other than Afghanistan. Let's bring in the vaccine mandate,
That's right.
right?
Because that
So
was
I think
September.
that's when he was getting these briefings. And
Yep.
still, at that point, if you went on a social media, you would have been censored to say that the bioweapons lab was a potential source for the virus. And there was no sort of even assigning guilt. I mean, it could have been an accident, could have been on purpose. You didn't have to take a position on that. Just say, like, hey, that sounds reasonable to me. They were doing research on coronaviruses there, and it makes sense to me that it might have, gotten out of its cage.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we have to turn the page on: the intelligence community being completely politicized.
We do. Absolutely 100% need to turn the page there. And I would throw into the mix are the way we classify things. I'm sure you saw it, maybe not to the level I did because I spent my majority of my time on the JTTF. That's Joint Terrorism Task Force for those who didn't know. But when you there's so many things I would see that were classified, and I would think, why is that classified? I think Americans should probably know that stuff. And there was COVID related things. And then fast forward a couple years, and this is in the Wall Street Journal because there was information along these lines back then that was classified. And it was, I remember often thinking, and even telling my boss, I think people should know this. Don't you? And she would say, yeah, they should, but it's classified. And it's like, well, why would that be classified? And then fast forward a couple years, I think it was the Senate who unanimously voted to declassify all COVID origin information. Where is that info? I'm pretty sure that they voted that way and then nothing happened. And that information, I don't know if it's even been declassified or not.
Maybe it'll be forthcoming in James Comer's next book after he gets done with telling you all the information that is ours, the American people's, that we paid for and
Yeah.
elected him to do. But he put it in his book, so you can buy that about Joe Biden's corruption.
Yeah,
And,
thanks.
and Garrett spent the majority of his time on a joint terrorism task force. The president is getting close to spending the majority of his time not doing the work of the president, reporting. I'm sorry, wrong one. No, that's it. Yep. Biden spent a quarter of his final year out of office vacationing or working remote. He's doing what the government employees do, right?
Thanks, Joe.
So turning the page on this guy, and he's a laugh line, Joe Biden. Guess what, by the way? But this guy is a jerk. He's a horrible human being who has allowed agencies and actually encourage agencies to destroy people like Garrett's lives, livelihoods, families' lives. So I don't hesitate at all about laughing about his senility. I'm not going to shed a tear when he dies and goes directly to hell. I'm not judging him. I'm just saying he's going to wind up in the fiery pits of South Hell, having his flesh never consumed. Not judging, but anyway, Biden spent 24%, so nearly a quarter of his final year away from the White House. 89 full and partial days out of the White House. That's more than FBI agents. And that doesn't count the days that he was taking foreign trips for official business. So he was sleeping on Air Force One or wandering off into the wilderness because he didn't know where to exit. The president's time out of office increased after he dropped out of the presidential race. He spent a total of 46 days in Delaware, Camp David, St. Croix, Nantucket, and California from August to the end of the year. So we're talking less than half the year. He took 46 days off in 5 months. So
Sheesh.
that's 9 days a month, man.
Yeah.
That he got off. And it's also the count, the 24% count does not include the time that Joe Biden spent sequestered, we'll say, at Camp David preparing for his June 27th debate against Donald Trump, where he said, we finally beat Medicare, beat it to death.
Yes.
He was, I guess, getting weaned off of the drug so they could have a bigger impact on him when they doped him up to go in there, but they just messed up on the timing. That didn't include that because he was doing the work of the president to prepare for a political debate.
This is one of the
Also, sorry, it didn't include when he was also recovering from his 9th bout with coronavirus, they say.
I hope he has all his boosters, Steve, because I mean the man would be dead if it wasn't for warp speed.
He's 97% boosters at this point.
This is one of the areas where I think, well, obviously, the vast majority of people are really happy to turn the page here. And again, in a way that we're turning the page back, so to speak, because we're going back to DJT. But that being said, think of a president, what presidents typically have done. And I know the government is big and has only grown over time, but up until Joe Biden's presidency, the president has been very involved, or at least it seems that way. And two things stand out to me. And you know, of course, that when Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi died like a dog, that stands out to me. And when Osama bin Laden was killed, that also stands out to me because in both those presidencies, you had Obama and then Trump coming out and addressing the nation. They were in the Situation Room. They were dialed in. Joe Biden has not been dialed in to anything since the beginning of his presidency. And it has only gotten worse and worse and worse. And it tells me that we are a late stage republic, that we don't even really need a president, and things would function. I don't think they'd function well. Quite frankly, I don't think they'd function well with a president either, because of how ballooned and bloated government has become. But Joe Biden's decrepit, old, unattentive, angry, napping, vacationing self, I think, has shown us all the government is going to run. It's going to just run its own course, and you don't even need these top echelon leaders doing much of anything, and the country will just proceed, on the path to destruction that we ultimately will arrive on.
Uh, you said something about the Situation Room, and it got me thinking. I'm gonna pull it up while we're talking about this. But do you remember when the Obama raid happened, and we had we had to show him being in charge, right? Because he made the hardest decision possible, right? It was, and we laughed at the
But
time because it
he
was
had to assassinate his half brother.
yeah. So, but the talking point that the right went out with, like, come on, ridiculous. Like, how do you not kill the most wanted terrorist in the history? And I think you and I have been pretty clear. It actually was a tough decision because that meant we had no justification for being in Afghanistan anymore, right?
Yeah.
But I remember the time, and memory does serve me correctly. I do not have the Joe Biden memory problems that he's clearly got here. That Obama at the time was not in charge. Like they weren't even worried about the optics of him being in charge. Okay, so here is a picture of. This is completely off topic, but it's worth going into. This is a picture of the Situation Room the day that they got Obama, or oh gosh, they got UBL. I guess that's what they
There
went
we
with,
go.
right?
Yes, yes,
All right.
UBL.
Oh, I'm having a hard time pulling it up. Uh
Oh no, don't worry, folks. He'll get it. He's a professional. We're 100, 57, 58 episodes into this thing,
yeah.
and we can filibuster if needed to pull up a
I've got it
photo
here. It's gonna be small. This is from Wikipedia. I'll pull up a bit different picture, but you can see Barack Obama sitting in the corner.
of just way off.
Yeah, way off, and Joe Biden's like off to the side. It's really
Uh,
about Hillary Clinton being sort of mostly in the
yes,
center of that picture,
trying to
right?
prop her up for her future.
Gosh, can we turn the page on her as
Oh,
well
no kidding.
with her
Goodness gracious.
Benny Hinn no makeup looks now? Uh,
Anything.
okay,
I like
all right.
that.
And final reference to Joe Biden, who we need to definitely have to turn the page on, and we need to turn the page entirely on the Ukraine funding,
Oh
right?
man, please.
We are sending yet another bill, another package. I guess this is money that the Republican Congress approved of when they were waving all the flags. The U.S. is sending another $5.9 billion in military and budget aid to Ukraine. So Biden announced $2.5 billion in additional security assistance. So that leaves a little remainder here. Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, made available $3.4 billion in additional budget aid to Ukraine. So we're going to pay for their government with our bankrupt government.
Yeah.
Biden's announcement includes $1.25 billion in military aid from U.S. stockpiles and $1.22 from the USA Initiative. That sounds really very patriotic, very like a Patriot Act, which basically we send money to the military-industrial complex to make weapons that we can directly send to Ukraine. So we're going to deplete our stockpiles, half of that $2.5 billion, and the other half is going to be aiding to make sure that Lockheed gets in the black this quarter. And Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, has said it before. Like, they are going to the last minute sending out and shoveling out as much money as possible into that conflict to launder back to themselves,
Yep.
to enrich their own little princeling children, make sure that their lobbyists and their donors are happy. The fat cats who run the Raytheons and the Lockheeds, make sure they're hitting their quarterlies, and get us as close to the brink of thermonuclear war with Russia as possible, as long as, Hunter Biden gets paid, because he's got complete amnesty now.
I remember the first time I heard the speech. I forget who it was. Old timey president who gave that speech on his way out the door about the military industrial complex. I should know his name right off the top of
Dwight
my head.
Eisenhower.
Dwight, old Dwight, and I remember thinking like, I don't know about that. That sounds kind of crazy. And then I joined the army, and then I hopefully, and I think it's true, became a little less naive. And I was like, maybe that guy was right about some of that stuff. And then the more I kept my mind open, the more I saw things on my way out the door of the army. I remember thinking, good riddance, just absolutely good riddance. And it has only gotten worse. That was 2012, 2012. I got out of the army, and it has only continued, and it has only cost more money. And I, you see this war going on in Ukraine, and the amount of money that we are spending. And you said it, Steve, taking from our bankrupt coffers to give to them. I think of my kids. I think of your kids. I've said it before. We were supposed to make this nation a better place for our kids, and we're not. We're failing on all fronts. And I think it is especially poignant for me right now because yesterday I saw this video on Twitter of a hand to hand fight to the death between a Ukrainian and a Russian. And in that moment, everything goes out the window. The money from America, the money from wherever, the corruption. It's two men pitched in Mortal Kombat, and it was one of them died at the end, and it's horrifying to watch. And I don't know why all these guys have, they essentially have body cameras on, and it was from the Ukrainian guy's view. He's the one who died, and I just pretty much the whole time was thinking war is a racket. And there's a book out there, I forget the author, but it's called War is a Racket, and it is absolutely spot on. And Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and the people over at Lockheed Martin, they don't give a rat's ass about you, me, your kids, my kids. They care only about stuffing their coffers. And you know how we know this is true? Look at Nancy Pelosi. I follow one of her stock trackers on Twitter. She was up 53% on the year. How much of that do you think is defense based? Because of all the money we keep sending, all the money we don't have, and for what? Oh man, it's disgusting. It's just it's weird too how I've become as anti-war as anyone. And when I enlisted, I was like, let's go get these bastards, And it's weird to look back on the story arc of your own life sometimes and see how you've changed and how you've arrived to different conclusions and beliefs along the way. And when it comes to war, and uh, is it necessary sometimes? Sure, but the absolute last it's the absolute last resort. And uh, w- for our politicians, it's just about making money. It's just absolutely disgusting.
It's not even our war, man. It's
Hmm.
that's the other thing too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can argue a just war theory if it involves, our country and interests that we have, but it's always been clear that that's not the case here. And we need to turn the page on all these foreign wars, which hopefully we look to be going into some sort of leadership that has an interest in doing that. Definitely in stopping sending money to the pit that is run by Zelensky. Um, DEI stuff hopefully going, at least being pared back to a certain extent. Hopefully have leadership that's coming in that's going to be interested in actually doing the job, and not just when Matlock's coming on later today. And let's pivot into the next one, right? I mean, aren't you worried that the sun god is going to be angry at you? Have you not separated your recycling into a separate bin yet, Garrett? Um, because really, what it boils down to, and all of this boils down to, is communism from one arm or another. If it's the DEI thing, yeah. If it's the globalist, we're going to be interested in propping up a military-industrial complex. Yeah, we'll do that. If it's lying about coronavirus so we can take people's freedoms away, yeah. If it's the sun monster, it's really just about population control. We need to get rid of people. We need to get rid of people so that we can eat more duck à l'orange and they can eat the bugs.
Yes.
So this is a study. It's a little dated. It's from a year ago, but I did catch my interest just because of the brashness of it. Now, the title is a little deceiving: Measurements of Methane and Nitrous Oxide in Human Breath and the Development of UK Scale Emissions. Again, sounds a little bit nerdy, and then you realize what they're talking about. And it's a study led by this Dr. Nicholas Cowan from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. And center is spelled CENTRE, so you know it's fancy. In the paper, she said, this is a woman who's named Nicholas. She
That-
said that
what?
the evidence of planet-killing breathing is pretty clear, and it shouldn't be ignored. Quote, we would urge caution in the assumption that emissions from humans are negligible. So you exhaling carbon dioxide is really the problem, Garrett.
Of course.
So
Might as well just.
what are some of the ways that we can take that into consideration? I mean, we've played the video before of Bill Gates talking about that equation. They got to get it as close to zero as possible. We just get rid of you,
Yes,
right?
that's what I was going to say. Let's start with all of you, all of the Nicholases who are women and the Bill Gates types. We'll start with you
Just breathe slower.
until you stop. I could help you along the way if you want.
It just occurred to me. I mean, breaking news. The best way that you can not get coronavirus and you could solve this global warming problem? You put a plastic bag over your head.
Please, Bill Gates, do us all a favor and follow Steve's recommendation. He's a trained professional, after all. Um, this I feel like most of my life I've heard a lot about cow flatulence and how it's destroying the
It's actually the
ozone layer.
burps, but yeah, it's funny to say cow farts.
And I think of that now. Okay, people, they're not turning away from their red meat enough. So let's see. Well, we'll keep that going on one front, but now we got to tell them that they're the problem, that they're breathing too much. Which it's interesting because then you'll see studies about the declining birth rate, and then it's like, oh, the world is going to collapse because the birth rate is so declining. Yeah, because you have people like Nicholas and Bill Gates saying, well, and I mean this is actually a very loaded subject about why the birth rate is declining the way it is, but it goes back. I guess the root of it is godlessness, and it's believing the lies of the world of just go and it's sex is just for fun, and you could do whatever you want, and then just take this infanticide pill the morning after if you think you might have got pregnant, and just whatever, just make as much money as you can, and don't worry about anything else, and off you go.
How big of a leap do you think this is? Sin taxes, right? They like, you go to New York City, if you want to buy a pack of cigarettes, it's like, I don't know, $150 and your next child
Yeah,
that it costs you. Uh, they're gonna make exercise a sin tax
I could see
because
that
you're
happening.
breathing
Breathing too
heavier,
much, yes.
you're exhaling more carbon dioxide, and we can tax you for that sin because you're also going to live longer because you exercised and going to exhale more. So pay the tax, we can take it and send it to Vladimir Zelensky. Problem
Uh,
solved.
yes, I see that happening. I think of Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World or George Orwell's 1984. It's going to be like a combination of those. I think where in Huxley's book they're all high on soma, willingly because they're getting drugged up, and we're kind of getting a meeting of those two worlds where just take the drugs. You don't need to exercise, and just.
Oh, we're getting there. You got to keep that one in reserve, Garrett. That's going to be the final story of the day. Just take the drug and don't exercise.
Oh boy.
You save money on the syntax.
Yes, you will save money on the syntax, but you'll have to pay for the drug. So,
Actually, let's not delay. Let's get to that one because this is definitely something that we need to turn the page on. I don't know, generationally or just our focus as a people. This is from the intake. 26% of Americans plan to include these weight loss drugs in their 2025 goal. So most people for New Year's, they set their resolution, they want to lose weight. 37% of Generation Z is going to include weight loss drugs.
dude,
It's not just that though; it's in place of exercise. So more than a quarter of Americans considering these drugs as part of their weight loss strategy. Gen Z leading the way, 37%. The weight loss medications initially intended to treat type 2 diabetes, they can cost thousands of dollars and lead to a long list of dangerous side effects, including death. But 86% say the benefits are worth the risk. 2 out of 3 Americans now believe that these medications are more effective than traditional weight loss methods like diet and exercise. Just outsource it to the pills.
Just take the pill. When you mentioned Joe Biden being on vacation 24% of the time, I was like, dang, that's a quarter of the time. This is worse. This quarter of people is droves worse. You're just gonna take the pill. A quarter of people are just gonna take a pill to hopefully lose weight. So it's the modern version of the vomitorium, where the opulence was so high and it was I puke to eat and I eat to puke and just keep the party going. That's kind of what this reminds me of. And man, that's a slippery slope. This is a page I don't want to turn, Steve. This is heading into Dangerland. You don't know. I'm assuming they did some sort of studies, probably more than they did on the COVID vaccine, to bring this drug to market. But typically, just putting foreign things into your body is not a benefit. Eat,
How about taking a drug where the side effects, like the drug is supposed to be like, hey, this is life saving, but one of the side effects is it could kill you. I mean, that would be like taking a vaccine for coronavirus that actually, well, actually, that's perfect.
yeah, because that'll kill you.
It'll get you
You-
coronavirus. All
uh,
right.
have you ever seen the Amazon show called The Boys? Have you ever
Yes.
seen that? Heard? It's one of my guilty pleasures. I find it fascinating and hilarious and very crude, but it's funny because it takes your idea of the X-Men to a whole new level because it adds the imperfections of humanity to them. And I I was watching it recently, and one of the humans, he doesn't have superpowers, but he's taking this drug called, I think they called it Compound V, and he takes it and it gives him some superpowers, and then he gets in a fight with one of the guys with the superpowers, and the guy's like, wait a second, what'd you do? And the human who's now on this Compound V is like at all costs, and his eyes like glow, and he shoots lasers out like Cyclops from X-Men. And this is what I think of with this GLP-1 drug. It's at all costs. I want to be fat. I like living a life of opulence, and I like the cheeseburger and the pizza, and I don't like exercising. And no, now they're gonna tax me on the exercise, so I'll just take the drug. I'll just take it. Just give me the drug, and hopefully the drug does the trick for me. And in life, as you know this, Steve, there's no easy button in life. You can't just coast through. You need to work hard. You need to put in the effort. If you want to change something about yourself or about your situation or about your goals that you may have, you have to be the one to put in the work and the effort. Yeah, there can be mentors and coaches and people in your life along the way, family, friends who help lift you up and maybe guide you in certain ways, but ultimately it comes down to you. And taking a pill, I don't know, man. To me, that's just a slippery slope.
It's a very un-American sentiment, like we're the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I realize that exercise is a tremendous waste of time. And if you, and the mythical pill, if you could just take the pill and like get jacked like Schwarzenegger, like, would you do it? I mean, I think
It'd be
most people,
tempting. Yeah.
it'd be a pretty easy decision for time management purposes. But
Uh-huh.
really, if you saved those hours that you'd be spending in the gym, would you be reading Dostoevsky with that, or would you just be scrolling your phone? I
Yeah.
think there's a tremendous benefit to the X factors to putting in the work, because you go to that dark place, you realize that, hey, like I might have a really crummy day today, but at the very least, I know that I did something good for myself. Like that's the Admiral McRaven about making your bed. Even if you have the worst day possible, you go home to a
Mhm.
nice made bed. You
Yep.
did achieve something today. You can't say you had a day where nothing was achieved by you. And frankly, taking a pill, you'll never get to that spot on it.
Mhm.
I got a couple that we're trying to turn the page on that I think are a good thing. And it was revealed at the very end in our closing out of all the news stories of 2024. Fannie Willis She was removed as the prosecutor from the Georgia case against Donald Trump for he was conspiring against rights to overturn an election. It was always a weak case in the beginning, but again, it was in Fulton County where they indicted him, where the foreperson of the grand jury was like, I was really excited that I got to be here and maybe I get to swear him in. And it was ridiculous. And so was Fannie Willis, because she took hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxpayers and paid her boyfriend, Nathan Wade, on it. So she got removed. But because she was a prosecutor, she was sort of immune from accountability for this ongoing investigation from the Georgia Senate. They couldn't really inquire. She could just say, like, not sending you anything. I'm not answering your questions. But now that she's been removed, and the corruption involved in that means that the Georgia Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, is going to have an opportunity to get a crack at her.
Oh.
So this is reported from the Blaze. Fannie Willis may have to testify now. She's going to talk about how she just keeps cash around her house for her misconduct. So in August, so before she was removed, the Georgia Senate committee subpoenaed her, seeking her testimony as part of its investigation into her alleged misconduct. However, her attorney contended that the Senate committee lacked the authority to compel her to testify. He claimed that the subpoena was overly broad and unrelated to its legislative needs, in his humble opinion. But the Fulton County Superior Court judge filed an order last week ruling that the state Senate can subpoena Fannie Willis and they can find out just how bad it went. And to me, the interest is not the palace intrigue, it's the salacious details about how she was going with her boy toy, Nathan Wade. And I mean, I think that needs to be vetted out because she was essentially laundering money over to her boyfriend. But we know that she was herself communicating with Washington, D.C., with the DOJ, with the January 6th committee. Nathan Wade had traveled to Washington, D.C., and had been communicating with them as well. We're going to see just how bad the relationship was, how much collusion, that is a word from the past, collusion
Yes.
went on. And I would say conspiring might have gone on. And who were the parties that were conspiring to bring about the lawfare here, which was just against all things that we believe in an alleged land of the free, where you're supposed to have a presumption of innocence and a justice system that has a blindfold on about who it is, unless, of course, you're orange tinted and have a red tie.
Of course. A lot of people say things like, wow, we just need to turn the page. We just need to move forward. We just need to move ahead. Donald Trump won, and now we just need to keep that momentum going, and off into the future we go. And I agree with that sentiment to some degree. But in a nation of laws, which a nation who's going to remain a nation must have laws, and they must enforce those laws. And that includes to people like Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade and countless others in government who got into those positions solely so they could weaponize them, so they could go after their political enemies. So yes, as much as I want to turn the page and move forward as well, there needs to be a massive modicum of justice when it comes to people like her. You cannot just let them walk.
No, we
Because
can't have amnesty.
No.
There needs to be a reckoning. There needs to be accountability.
Mhm.
And not just vengeance because you happen to vote for a Democrat or a
Right.
communist. I mean, I have to question you, like, about even the Tulsi Gabbards of the world or the RFKs, like, oh, we're on your side now. You're away from leadership, or you're seriously siloed in what you can do here. But we can never, ever have an expectation of coming together as a country by just let bygones be bygones.
Right.
Because the Republicans get elected to be something and the communist Democrats get elected to do something, and that is lawfare. They embrace the fact that they were involved in this cold civil war, and the Republicans don't. Hopefully there's enough people in the room of leadership that say, oh, no, we need to have accountability for people who just did the wrong thing,
Right.
broke the law. They were in a
Mhm.
position of public trust, and they used that position to personally enrich themselves or their boyfriends, as it was for Fannie Willis, or people as pertain to coronavirus that reaped the whirlwinds electorally, or just like grabbing onto power. If they were an executive, they were a governor or a mayor or city manager or something to that effect, or they push forward DEI initiatives or global warming. You can't breathe, plebe. initiatives because they wanted to sit on high because they view themselves as actual royalty rather than a member of our social compact where we're all theoretically supposed to be equal here.
Mm-hmm.
I want, that's a nice place to bring it to, because people who have not been equal under the law, for one specific law and just writ large entirely, are pro-lifers. Pro-lifers have been victimized, particularly under the Joe Biden administration. 92% of FACE Act prosecutions were against pro-lifers. It's a law that prevents people from blockading abortion baby kill mills. But it also prevents you from blockading or vandalizing or damaging a crisis pregnancy center, or even impeding someone from going to a religious worship ceremony. So you would think there would be, I don't know, a certain level of parity, but applied more than any other presidential administration in 4 years, by the way, not 8, and 92% against pro-lifers. So this was an opinion piece from The Hill about clemency. And these are clemency for pro-life activists convicted under the FACE Act. President Biden recently commuted the sentences of 1,500 Americans and pardoned 39 more, the largest act of clemency in a single day in American history. Also pardoned his son, who he says was unfairly targeted by the DOJ.
Sure.
That didn't include, however, and we've talked about her before, Eva Edel, 89-year-old survivor of a concentration camp, still being prosecuted. Mark Houck, prosecuted to the point where he was, the charges against him at a city and local level were like, this is not a problem. But then the DOJ swept in and arrested him when he was bare feet making a quiche in front of his kids at 6 o'clock in the morning. He has like 6 or 7 kids. And Mark had also said, if you charge me, let me know. I have no criminal history. I'll surrender.
Right.
But we had to send the SWAT team to do that. A couple of stats on this one. 400 attacks on churches during Biden's first term. 1 prosecution. Prosecution rate of 0.25%. They do happen at night. So,
Yes. So
we
cover up
can't find that out. 70% of abortion-related violence in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision was directed against pro-life organizations. And yet, 92% of FACE Act violations went against pro-lifers. And this also coming from the man here who I've got a brief video clip of, Joe Biden, back when he had, high double-digit IQ, before the brain completely dissolved. This was him talking about crime. He was really tough on crime, don't you know?
Increase the penalties. Increase them. I would put the son of a gun in jail. Put them to death. Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking. 60 new death penalties, brand new, 60. There are 70 additional enhancements. A Democratic president wants to build 125,000 new prison cells. That's the secret.
Yeah, and that whisper's been around forever.
Dude, he's a despicable person. And you mentioned it earlier in the show about, not judging him, but he's going straight to the deepest pits of hell. And some people might take that and say, wow, he claims to be a Catholic. He's been a good Catholic boy his whole life. Well, has he? Because how do you know someone's faith? How do you know their belief system? From a biblical worldview, so from a Catholic worldview, it would be by their fruit. What fruit have they borne over their life? This guy has borne nothing but lies and evil. So no, we're not sitting here judging him, condemning him to hell. God will take care of that all on his own. But you can see the fruit or lack of fruit that has been born throughout his entire life, culminating with pardoning his own son and gaslighting the people to say that the DOJ were the ones unfairly targeting him. Give me a break. And then just, oh man, that clip really, it encapsulates so much of his political career. Whichever way the wind is blowing, that's where Joe would go.
Yeah, for everybody who made the case when he was running for president, I don't know, the 98th time, when the time that he was certified the winner in 2020, that he was moderate, right? He was a centrist. The comparison I heard about him once that I thought was probably the most appropriate analogy was that he's like a buoy for the Democrats. Like he just floats and bobs. So he's in the center of where the communists happen to be at that time. So in the mid 90s, he was like, yeah, let's lock up the crime because you had an appetite for that here. But then you push forward during the BLM riots, and they wanted to uh, have monuments to George Floyd, and you want to lock up those evil FACE Act people, but then pardon 37 people on death row, people who killed children, gouged their eyes out, and killed service members. Pardon your son, of course. I mean, personal interest is going to override everything, no matter the fact. But Joe Biden's an awful human being, and I think we're both in agreement that we're not judging him, but he'll definitely wind up in South Hell, which is similar to Southeast DC. All right, Garrett, coming up on the end, I wanted to get your thoughts here, and then I do have a palate cleanse on turning the page, or at least comparing one area of the country to another, and what we need to get closer to.
Yeah, I like it. With New Year's, and I think this ties in with some of the topics we've touched on about turning the page, about taking the GL1P pill or whatever it was called, and putting in work and exercise and New Year's resolutions. I think a proper verse for starting off the new year for many is Proverbs 13:4. It says, "The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied." So I guess I would say just work hard, don't be a sluggard, and just crave after things that you can't achieve because of your sluggishness. But be diligent, work hard, and let's all move forward together and turn the page into 2025.
Agreed. I mean, I think there's definitely some benefit to going to that dark place that nobody wants to go to, and you can actually find some reasons to go there that are beneficial, not just to your physical health, to your mental health. I know that I do most of my reading, quote unquote. I mean, listening to audiobooks when I'm doing my extra long runs, as well as listening to the American Radicals podcast, so I can continually endeavor to get better, make sure that I'm not overusing certain words and terms. I'm that pedantic and that jerky, which is why I stopped saying the word obviously, which I was doing very much to excess in
Oh,
early January 2024. No longer. I resolved to change that. People have to let me know in the comments of what words or, I don't know, vocal tics that they have that bother them, and I will endeavor to do better. All
I
right.
say like a lot, I've noticed. And somebody pointed it out in the chat, and then I started realizing I do say that a lot. So I'm working on it. I think I still say it probably too much, but
I condemn you to 40 days of fasting to improve your misuse of the term like, to just fill in dead air. All right. Palate cleanse day, turning the page. I mean, they're two communist blue areas, but at least the sentiment of one is one that I'd like to get closer to, because in our house we say gay and retarded, as is what they really do in Boston
bunch of
when they're
gay
not voting
retards.
when they're not voting for a communist mayor. They still at least have that history. Enjoy this one, guys.
When I first started telling this joke about my brother in San Francisco, I said, my disabled brother. And the San Franciscan couple came up to me after the show, and they were like, I believe they prefer the term special needs. I was like, oh, thank you for your service. You know? You're not the one who took him to get ice cream, though, are you? No, that was me. Okay. First time I told this story at a comedy club in Boston. This is true. This guy came up to me after the show, and he was like, great stuff. You know, I also have a cousin who's retarded. I was like, Toto, we are not in California anymore. When I first started telling...
I'm not a huge fan typically of the female comics. I think that there's some good ones out there, but a lot of them get elevated too quick because of the DEI, and they're just not ready for chops. But good point. And always rip on the San Francisco people, particularly
Yes,
Nancy Pelosi, who's gotten
please.
way too rich on the military-industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to close us out today on the American Radicals podcast, guys. Thank you again for joining us. If you haven't already, make sure that you smash the thumbs up. Give us a follow if you haven't. Subscribe if your heart compels you to do that. We hope that you guys have a fantastic weekend, and we'll be back with you Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern time, back on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. Have a great weekend, guys.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.